Good afternoon, all. As you know, we were looking at the life of Moses. And last week, we kind of did a deep dive into one aspect of biblical history that was the beginning of Passover and how it communicated to our communion table. Today, we're going to go back to Moses. As a leader, he's been through a lot. To all of us, we're called to be, there's a call for almost all of us to be leaders in different aspects of life. As a husband, as a wife, as a boss, as a parent. We all are called to lead in different ways. There is a lot to be learned from the life of Moses. Today we're going to see how he deals with a stubborn and ungrateful group. As you know, last time we left him, he was in front of Pharaoh, and he told Pharaoh, hey, if you don't let us go, God is going to bring this last plague on you, and it's going to be the worst that you've seen so far. And he didn't, and what he said came through. And every firstborn, human and animal, was killed. Finally, Pharaoh relented, and he said, okay, go. Take all your animals, take all the people, whatever you want, just leave. And as you remember, God made Moses and the Israelites be seen favorably in front of the Egyptians, so they gave them gold and silver as they were leaving. So they're leaving. It's the middle of the night. Let's see what's happening. Exodus, this is chapter 13 and verse 17. Let's start from there. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them to the road through the Philistine country, though it was short. For God said, if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. The Israelites went up out of Egypt boldly, ready to battle. Just to step back and explain what's happening. They're here, they're trying to get here. God is not taking them this way. He's going to take them this way. Why is God doing this? We've been told ever since we were little kids, what is the shortest distance between 2 points? Is a straight line. In God's economy, maybe it's not. Because he has other things he's worried about. What did we read? He said, if they go that way, they're going to face war. And they might be discouraged. And they might want to return to Egypt. Now, why would they face war? Well, if you were bordering Egypt and you had the 2 million people group come into your country, you might think you're being invaded. Right? And then react in that way. So God is trying to protect them. One lesson to highlight for us here. Sometimes God's answers of not now might be for our protection. He was trying to protect them. And as you remember, Joseph had made the Israelites promise him that when God gets them out of Egypt, they were supposed to take his bones, and they did that. They took his mummified body with them. After leaving, they camped at Ham on the edge of the desert. Now, why is God taking them through the desert? Something beautiful here. Verse 21 of chapter 13 says, By the day, Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel day and night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. What is the significance of this? God is leading them, and they're following God. This is a very important point for the rest of the story. They're not making their own decisions. They're not deciding which way to go themselves. God is leading them. Everything that's about to happen next must be put in this context, that this is God's leading. Then the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back. Wait, we were just going. Why are we going to turn back? And camp between Migdol and the sea. And they went to camp by the sea, directly opposite Baal Zebulun. Now, Pharaoh hears this, and he says, oh, I got him. Now, the rest of the story explains that they're by the mountains on one side, desert on the other, and sea in front of them. And there was only the way they came in. And Pharaoh hears this. He says, now I got him. You see, even though he said, you can go, at some point after he let them go, they realized, Pharaoh and his officials, they said, wait, we had this free force of 600,000 men. We were building pyramids, we were building these great building projects. Why did we let them go? They're feeling like they made a mistake. They forgot all the plagues that caused them to let them go. Just like Israel is going to forget what God had done for them. That's a point we will come back to. They forgot what caused them to let them go. So he gets prideful again, along with his officials. He says, I'm going to get them this time. And now they're stuck. On one side, there are mountains. They can't go anywhere. Ahead of them is the sea. They can't go anywhere. To the right is the desert. They're going to die there in 3 days. So the only way is behind them, which is where I'm going to be. So he gets together 600 of his best chariots, we're told, along with the other ones. So he basically gathers all his army. At the time, Egypt was the superpower of the day. So imagine a superpower of the day coming after a group of people who's got no weapons. It's not even fair. There is not going to be any fight there. It's over before it begins, right? That's what Pharaoh thinks. That's it. I got him. But who he forgot? One big fact. He forgot God. And he forgot that they were following him. They were being led by God. They weren't crafting their own plans. They weren't crafting their own maps. They weren't trying to say, if I use this connection to reach to this point to get there. They weren't doing that. All they were doing was following the Lord. With the cloud in the morning, the light at night. Surrendered and following. And then Israelites look at the horizon. They're camped by the sea, mountains on one side, desert on the other, and all of a sudden they see smoke clouds rising. They hear the chariots, they hear the horses. They say, oh no, we're done. I like the way they put it. It's almost humorous if it wasn't tragic. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, Was it because there were no graves in Egypt? This is, it's been said, comedy is tragedy plus time. That's why sometimes you might hear a comic, he might make a joke about something that recently happened, and he might say, is it too soon? There is a reason for that, because comedy is tragedy plus time. And it's tragic, but it's funny the way they put it. Were there not enough graves in Egypt that you brought us here to die here in the wilderness? But in essence, they're terrified. But they're making the same mistake. Don't miss this part. Pharaoh is making. Pharaoh forgot the reason he had to let them go. And Israelites forgot the reason they were free. Think about it. Have you ever been in that kind of a situation where you were stuck, you had nowhere to go? There was no way out that you could see. It seemed like an impossible situation. It made no earthly sense to do anything. You just had to get ready to lose, get ready to die. You were surrounded by impossibilities. There was not one way out for you. All of us have been there. If you haven't, you will be. What do? One, we make sure that we're in that spot because we're following the Lord. Okay? This is key. I know I repeated this, but I want to say it again and again and again. If I get myself in trouble by making ungodly decisions, I cannot rely on God to save me miraculously. Okay? Let's get this clear. But if I'm following the Lord, doing what He wants me to do, He's leading me, but I am at a place where I'm stuck. What do I do at that moment? What did Israel do? They were terrified. What was Pharaoh expecting them to do? He was trying to get them terrified. And he had decided that he was going to kill them. You have an enemy that wants to keep you terrified. He wants you in fear constantly. And in our humanness, it's easy for us to stay in that mode of fear. Because whenever we look across us and we don't see certainty, we get terrified. Whenever we look at tomorrow, our situations, our circumstances, our life in general, and we cannot see tomorrow clearly in a way that makes sense to us, we get scared. And when we get scared, we make mistakes. Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone. Let us serve the Egyptians. This is the Israelites talking to Moses. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians as slaves than to die in the desert. How many times you thought you were in an impossible situation and you wanted to go back to your mistakes? How many times you were in a very difficult situation and you wanted to go back to a dysfunctional situation, a bad business, a bad relationship, a bad family situation, bad employment? That's exactly where the enemy wants you. Oh, you can rationalize and make excuses and make it look all beautiful. This reminds me of a story. As I was growing up, there was a family. It was difficult to get a green card to come to America. And these people got a green card somehow. So they sold all their houses, their businesses, and everything. And And they came over here. And as almost all of you know, to start a new life in a different country with a different language is difficult. These people were two grown adults with two young daughters. And the kids got enrolled in school, and the parents looked for employment. They found a job, and about 6 months went by. They were not happy here. And one day, one of the girls came home with makeup and her hair done, and Mom just was terrified because that's not how she sent her to school. So this happened at school. And they said, that's it, we're done. We are not going to live in this country anymore. And then after that moment, they decided to go back to the country they came from. Now, the situation they came from was not ideal. It was bad. But when I was talking with them, they said, at that moment, we didn't even think about the bad parts. We could only see the good parts. And even the bad parts seemed good to us. Why? Because they were scared. And they made a foolish decision to go back to their bad situation, and it didn't work out too good for them. Same thing is happening with Israel. They were just saved out of slavery. Because they cannot see certainly what tomorrow holds, they want to go back to that miserable existence. They're not even looking at it as bad anymore. See, this is exactly where your enemy wants you. Scared, uncertain, so that you keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Because he wants to keep you there. He wants you uncertain. He wants you fearful. Fear is the greatest weapon your enemy has against you. So what would you do if you were Moses? Here, God sent you to these people. You went through all kinds of circumstances, 10 horrendous plagues, hundreds of thousands of maybe people died. A country that you left behind is in shambles. And God did all this for you and your people. And these people that he did it for are now saying they want to go back to it. Why did you bring us out here? What would you do if you were Moses? If you were leading this group, what would you do? You would probably leave them there and go home. Right? Thank God God doesn't do that. Moses answered, this is beautiful. This is chapter 14, verse 13. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid. Here we go, fear again, right? Do not be afraid. Stand firm. This is key, underline. Stand firm. And you will see the deliverance of the Lord that will bring to you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Oh, how I need to read those verses every day, 10 times a day. Don't be afraid. Lord will fight for you. Be still. Stand firm. I wonder if you need to hear those verses today. I could tell you you do. There are probably fears in your life that's motivating you, pushing you into making foolish decisions. Don't be afraid. Be still. Let the Lord show you what he wants you to do, what he will do for you. And there is something about standing firm that caught my attention, because this very verse is used twice in the New Testament in the context of fighting against Satan. Here are Israelites As far as they're concerned, they're about to be killed. And they're terrified. God is telling them through Moses, don't be afraid, stand firm. Turn with me to Ephesians chapter 6, the armor of God chapter, right? Chapter 6, verse 10 starts, finally be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against the flesh and blood, but against rulers and against authorities, against powers of darkness, against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realm. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. After you have done everything to stand, stand firm then. And it continues. Do you see a connection with Exodus, Old Testament and New Testament? Do you see a connection between standing firm against fear and against your enemy? Standing firm is key. One more example of this is in Peter. It's in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in your faith. Again, standing firm. Peter is saying, when the enemy, like a roaring lion, is circling around you, stand firm. Don't be afraid. Paul is saying, when that evil day comes, when you're under attack, when you're fearful, put on the full armor of God and stand firm. Moses says, even though you have Pharaoh behind you and nowhere to escape, stand firm. Don't be afraid. So today I have a question. What are you afraid of in your life that's pushing you to make a foolish decision out of fear? Out of fear of tomorrow. What is there in your life? To be poor, to be lonely, to be unsuccessful, to be whatever it is, unhealthy, let's call it. Whatever is coming from fear is not coming from God. Whatever pushes you to make an ungodly decision out of fear is going to end up destroying your life, at the very best, making you miserable. So, take some time this week. Look into your heart, your mind, your plans. Most importantly, look at your motivations. What's motivating you? Is it fear? Are you making decisions out of fear? If you are, stand still. Don't make that decision. Stand firm on that day. And wait for God to work. That's the most difficult part of our life. Our life of faith. Wait for God to work. Why? Because, going back to the beginning, if you're following the Lord and He brought you here, there is a very good reason why you're here. And if you're following God's direction and He brought you to this situation and you're fearful, what do? We don't make the same mistake Israelites and the Pharaoh made. What was it? What God did in our life in the past. Remember all the things that the Lord did in your life. Did He leave you alone? Did you die? Did what you were afraid of come through in your life? No. So why do you think God's going to leave you alone now? Why do you think you're left with your own abilities and devices? Why aren't you trusting Him? Why are you afraid? When we are afraid, we make the most foolish decisions in our lives. So remember what He did in the past, knowing that He brought us here, and stand still and wait for Him to do whatever He is planning for you. I can guarantee you this. Whatever He's planning is so much better than what I can do. Because as we saw last week, the night they were leaving, God was giving them instructions about 1,300 years from now. He's got it all figured out. We can't. When He was taking him through the detour in the desert, He was doing it to protect them. You might be in the desert today, uncertain, not knowing what's happening. You might be questioning God, God, how come this or that thing didn't happen in my life yet? Wait. There's a very good reason. And the question becomes, do I trust God with that decision? Or do I want to take the control and want to do it my way? And you guys all know, if I do it my way, I mess it up. I can never do it as good as God. So, stand still. And the last thing I want to mention is this. The most beautiful part of this paragraph. The Egyptians you see today, you will never, ever see again. What is your enemy today that's making you scared? Who is your enemy today? Is it a thought? Is it an attitude? Is it a person? Is it an organization? Is it a group? Whatever it is. Is it a desire? You know, your desires can be your enemy, because within ungodly contexts, they will work against you. They will push you to make foolish and wrong and awful decisions. Who's your enemy today? Is there anything in your life that you've been struggling against, fighting against, and keep losing and losing and losing? Today, I invite you, surrender. Stand still, stand firm in the Lord, and say, Lord, I can't deal with this. I'm looking at the sea, mountains on my side, an army behind me. I don't know what to do. Here's my situation. I'm standing firm in my faith. Do it. Because it could be that God will be telling you, the enemy you see today, you will never see again. That only happens through standing firm. And you guys know the rest of the story. They stood still boldly, complaining, but they stood still. What did God do? He took this impossible situation through His great miraculous power, as you can see in this beautifully illustrated picture. He parted the Red Sea. He brought the east wind all night. He dried the ground, so it wasn't even muddy for 2 million people, and plus all the animals to walk through. They walked through, across to the other side. And when Pharaoh saw this, and God slowed them down through getting in their wheels and confusing them with smoke and storms. Finally, when Pharaoh got after them, as soon as the last Israelite crossed across, the sea closed. Pharaoh was no more. His army was gone. And that's what God promises you today. If you are following His direction, again, remember my caveat, not because you're doing your own planning, your own manipulation and engineering, not that. You're at a place right now because of God's leading and you following Him. And you're in an impossible situation. God has a word for you. Don't be afraid. Be still and let Him do miraculously. The enemy you see today, you will never see again. Our job is to stand still, stand firm, and not be afraid. Trust in Him that He's our loving Father. And He's got everything figured out. He's never in a hurry. He's got eternity already planned for you. So, rest easy. Don't be afraid. Trust in Him. Don't let the enemy scare you. Follow Him. God bless you.